And we're live on Facebook too now, Sunny.
Okay,
and people are just joining the Zoom as well.
Okay, just let me know when we can start.
Yep, you're good to start.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Sani Ali. I'm a consultant in microbiology and infection at the Trust. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. This is a webinar that's dedicated to really answering the concerns of staff members with regards to the COVID vaccination program we have, and hopefully helping to support them to overcome vaccine hesitancy. So today we have a panel of up to 5 experts. I'm very grateful for colleagues for offering to help with this. We will go through and have some brief introductions. I'll start first of all with Will Thomas. Will, do you want to introduce yourself?
Morning, Sani. My name's Will Thomas and I'm a haematology consultant at Addenbrooke's, and I look after people with bleeding and thrombotic disorders.
Thank you, Will. And then we've got Shu.
Hi, my name is Supan Chong and I'm consultant in maternal and fetal medicine. I work at the Rosie Hospital.
Excellent, thank you. And then we've got Chris Smith, who has just joined us. Chris.
Hello, Sani. Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm also the naked scientist and a consultant virologist. Sounds like University Challenge, this, doesn't it? My chosen specialist subject is COVID-19.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to see that you're fully dressed this morning. We've got Giles. Giles, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Sani. Good morning, everybody. I'm Giles. I'm the Associate Director for Workforce Health, and I lead on the provision of the vaccine to our staff.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Hamid?
I'm Hamid Jalal, retired virologist, but today my presentation is going to be more about the religious and cultural views about vaccine, and I have led Friday prayer at Addenbrooke's from 2007 till my retirement in September.
Well, Hamid, thank you for joining us despite being retired. We very much appreciate it. And then finally, we've got Tony, who is dealing with our comms and was responsible for setting this up. Thank you, Tony. So from the perspective of the webinar, there are a few things that I just wanted to say. First of all, we will not be talking about allergy issues as it relates to COVID vaccine. Hopefully, we'll have a dedicated session by one of our allergy consultants, Dr. Shaib Nasser, in the next few weeks, where we'll be dealing with this in great detail. Secondly, we're also not going to address the issues of conditions of deployment for workers as it relates to mandatory vaccination, i.e. the employment issues, etc. This will be handled at a different level by the Trust. So the plan is we will spend about 20 minutes talking about COVID vaccine, and then another 20 to 25 minutes addressing questions that our listeners might have. So I would like to start first of all with Chris. Chris, would like to know more about the concerns that staff have as it relates to the development of these vaccines, the speed at which they were introduced. Are they really safe? And why is it that we need to be vaccinated, even though some of us might have actually have had COVID? So if we're talking about immunity, why not just have the COVID infection itself and get it over and done with?
Good morning, Sani. Is Novak Djokovic joining us on the call?
No, I'm afraid not. But
just wondered, because of course he's got something to say about this as well. You've got to wind the clock back to about 2 years ago, because it is actually almost this day, 2 years ago, that these reports began to surface of this illness, which was circulating in one corner of one city, in one country, in one part of the world. That was Wuhan in China, of this abrupt onset respiratory illness that seemed to be centered on a seafood market and seemed to be causing a lot of cases, but we were reassured by Chinese authorities at that time was not spreading. Now that very quickly changed, of course. By the end of January, we were beginning to see pretty alarming graphs of an explosion in cases, which told us this was a very transmissible infection. And by then, of course, with thousands of people leaving Wuhan airport every day, as in traveling internationally. In fact, we had a contingent who came to Cambridge because, believe it or not, Cambridge is twinned with Wuhan. And we had a contingent of lawyers who came for a meeting at one of the colleges. and they brought with them a respiratory infection, turned out to be flu in that case. But it transmits very well. It very quickly, of course, eclipsed the planet. No one foresaw that we would 2 years later still be enthralled to this virus. The other thing people said was it's going to take a long time before we've got any vaccines or any drugs that can combat this. And within 10 months, we actually had them. And that was what alarmed some people. Some people said, well, how can we go from zero to hero so quickly? How can we go from not knowing about this virus from its inception, we knew nothing about its existence, to knowing enough to produce safe vaccines, and safe vaccines that will protect billions and save millions, and do it all in 10 months. Never done that before. Normally it takes 10 years and about $10 billion to develop a new drug or medicine. How can this be achieved? Well, what was really missing from those arguments, or was not conveyed, was the huge amount of effort and time that had already been put in this technology in the years leading up to 2021, when those vaccines first began to be deployed. Although the technology in some cases is going into humans for the first time, it's been being developed and being tested and trialed in various contexts for decades. AstraZeneca's vaccine, the construct that was used to actually build that vaccine, helped to turn the tables on Ebola in West Africa in the first part of the previous decade, when Ebola surged, caused tens of thousands of cases. It was that vaccine, albeit against Ebola rather than containing a bit of coronavirus, that helped to protect thousands of people. So actually there was enormous amounts of data already there, also in the context of malaria, about how these vaccines work, how they interact with the immune system, and the sorts of protections that they can confer on people. Then there's the newer generation of vaccines, the so-called mRNA vaccines. And although they hadn't gone into people, we've had, until now, we've had a lot of trial runs at this. Because if you think back to about 2016, there was a big surge in another virus which began to spread alarmingly, and that was Zika. And it went from small numbers of cases and isolated outbreaks, which had been centered on a number of countries in a low-grade kind of way for many years, to suddenly causing thousands to millions of cases, many of them asymptomatic and many of them associated with the potential to cause birth defects. People were very alarmed. And because of that level of alarm, and because of the number of people around the world who live in areas susceptible to that virus, as a result, there was enormous investment in new technologies and new vaccine technologies that could be used to protect people against Zika. In the event, Zika was controlled in other ways. It didn't turn into the major nightmare we've had with COVID, but the technology to develop Zika vaccines, including mRNA-based vaccines like Pfizer, like Moderna's vaccines, that was in place. There was already a lot of preliminary data there and a lot of understanding. So when coronavirus surfaced, it was actually relatively trivial to take the right bits of that virus and put them into the background of these quite well understood platforms, and then build that up into a big scale operation that could be used to protect people.
So
and
Chris,
although people say,
yes.
well, how can you do this so quickly? Actually, the other thing that was done was to streamline the process of drug testing. So no corners were cut, but what was occurring was that data that were generated as these things were tested were fed into the regulators in a very streamlined, very efficient way, so that rather than accumulate all the data, they look at it, then they go back with questions, then those questions are answered, and then the next stage is launched. This was all happening in parallel. It's given us a whole new way of regulating and processing the development of drugs, and it's happening a lot faster. So the same checks and balances are being done. The same people have to be reassured that this is all safe, but they're doing it all in parallel and therefore a lot faster.
So Chris, thank you. That was quite detailed. In other words, you're saying that no step was skipped in order to get a vaccine into the market.
The way in which we regulate drugs is that companies, individuals, entities, organizations invent the intellectual property that is how that drug works. Other entities make those drugs, but independent groups have to be completely satisfied that they're safe, not just in our country, but in every country. Every country has an organization. In our country, it's called the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. they have very stringent guidance and guidelines and requirements that must be fulfilled, because they are effectively signing off saying it's okay for this to go into millions of people. And if it's not safe, if it has the potential to cause harm, then they are potentially liable. Their good name, their reputation, and worse, is at stake. So they're not going to sign off on something that they're not confident that they would give to themselves.
Thank you. We'll come back to you in a minute, Chris, but thank you very much for that. That was very clear. Will, so we've heard that these vaccines are safe, but we've had reports of unusual clotting events with some of these vaccines. Should we be worried?
Yeah, thanks, Sani. So what we can say is that around 1 in 60,000 people that have the AstraZeneca vaccine develop this syndrome of low platelets and blood clots, and the blood clots typically occurred in the brain. The AZ vaccine, to all intents and purposes, is not being used, so actually we can park that. So we're left with Pfizer and Moderna. The studies for Pfizer and Moderna show either no or at best a very, very weak link with blood clots. And to my mind, I don't want to bore you with the statistics, but if you look at it, you can argue there is no effect with most of these studies, and half of them show no effect anyway. So the vaccines, the mRNA ones, do not carry clot risks. And then that is balanced against COVID, and 10 to 15% of patients that come into hospital with COVID will get a clot. Around 30% of patients in ITU with COVID will get a clot. So you're likely to get a clot if you get COVID, relatively speaking, and you're not if you have the vaccine.
Thank you, Will. So I do understand that if you have COVID, your risk of getting a clot is up to 20-fold more likely. You're more likely, up to 20-fold more likely than if you have the vaccine. So really, we're not comparing like with like at all in terms of risks. Great.
Correct.
Thank you. And I believe there were concerns about myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart, which has been seen particularly in young males below the age of 25. This is a very rare event. It's usually self-limiting. It's also related to some of the vaccines, but overall it tends to be self-limiting, and it's really not a major issue compared to the side effects that one can get and the harm that can come from having the infection itself. So I'll move on to Shu. Shu, pregnancy, breastfeeding.
I'm just going to start off by saying that because of all the studies being undertaken initially that were done in non-pregnant women, that created a lot of vaccine hesitancy in the population of women who were pregnant. And it took a lot of brave pregnant women who balanced those risks by themselves to give us this real life world experience. And now nearly 200,000 women who've had the COVID vaccine, and this is the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, have shown that it is safe. And I first want to start off by talking about pregnant women, because these are the women who are most at risk. And the risk seems to stem from being in the third trimester. And in the UK, we have an amazing research team in Oxford led by Professor Marion Knight. And her group have shown us that nearly 2,000 women have been admitted to hospital from the start of the pandemic with symptoms of COVID. And about 20% of these women will have very severe symptoms needing hospital admission. So that's about 235 women needing admission to intensive care. And if you need admission to intensive care, your baby will need to be delivered most likely prematurely to help with the ventilation that's required to help them survive. So to put this into context, so my local secondary school has about 500 children in their school. And so if you imagine that school having half of that population of pregnant women filling up ITU beds all around the country, it's a pretty serious condition for pregnant women. And very, very sadly, about 30 women have died because of COVID. And these are women who would not normally be at that severe risk of death, if not for the fact that this is a very serious causing disease for pregnant women. And one of the problems that we have as obstetricians is that we cannot predict. There are no tools that we have at the moment to predict who is going to have mild asymptomatic disease and who are going to have the very severe disease that causes ITU admission. Vaccination has pretty much eliminated the chances of being admitted to hospital for ITU care. And in the most recent UCOS data, they've consistently shown that the women who have had vaccination have not required admission to intensive care. And only 2 of those admitted had 1 dose of the vaccine. And it's completely speculative, but it could have been the women who were invited to have a vaccine and then put off the 2nd dose after becoming pregnant, or it could be women who had the first dose of the COVID vaccine and then were not yet eligible to have the 2nd vaccine. Vaccination is really very, very safe. In terms of the issues with regards to breastfeeding, we do not yet have a program of vaccination for infants, babies, and children under the age of 12. And vaccination will allow women to develop antibodies in their body, which transmits into the breast milk, which then protects their babies. And there seems to be new data which suggests that the antibodies that the babies get from breast milk by vaccination is better compared to those women who've had been exposed to COVID. We don't know yet why that exists. I don't think there's a whole lot of data about breastfeeding, the level of antibodies and the type of antibodies in breast milk, but it is definitely safe to be vaccinated. It's definitely safe to breastfeed after vaccination, and it will help protect your baby. You've asked me to talk a little bit, Sunny, about menstrual irregularities, and just to touch on that briefly. There were women who self-reported menstrual irregularities after having their vaccination. There is a very brilliant researcher called Dr. Mail, I think his name is Victoria Mail, who's based at Imperial, and she's got a paper that's currently being peer-reviewed that has showed that vaccination with any of the different types of vaccines, either AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, does not actually significantly cause a menstrual irregularity. It's because women have noticed and recorded their menses that it's made them notice the change. And certainly, even if there was a mild menstrual irregularity, that does not translate into infertility. And so this may be relevant for women who are about to embark on IVF treatment or fertility assistance to conceive. Please do have your vaccine, because it will not affect your treatment. It will not affect your cycles. It will not affect your fertility, and it can protect you for when you become pregnant.
Thank you, Shu. So we've heard that in pregnant women, particularly in late stages of pregnancy, they are more likely to have severe illness and land on ICU if they're not vaccinated. Vaccination is the best way to prevent harm to the baby as well as to the mother. But Shu, you've talked about antibodies crossing onto the, in terms of breastfeeding, etc. What about the messenger RNA, mRNA that people are concerned about? Can that cause problems in?
So when I was a PhD student, I worked on mRNA, and mRNA disintegrates pretty much straight away if you leave it on the counter for 2 seconds, because the enzymes just diminish it. So the type of mRNA that's being transmitted into your body triggers a response in your muscle area where your body recognizes there's different material and then starts to produce antibodies. It does not cross into the placenta. It does not cause harm to the baby. It does not change your body's genetics. It does not change your baby's genetics. It causes your body to produce antibodies, which protects you and then the pregnancy and the baby.
Thank you, Shu. That's very clear. If you can stay online, because there might be other questions that will come up. Having done one-to-one sessions with our staff members, some of the themes that we are visiting today relate to the common questions that we have seen in with staff members. I'll now move on to Hamid. Hamid, I would like you to address some of the issues in terms of the components of the vaccines. Are they really compatible with religious beliefs, particularly as it relates to Islam, I believe, is what we will be concentrating on this morning. Is it haram? In other words, is it not allowed? Is it okay for people of the Muslim faith to have these vaccines?
Thank you, Sani. I will address this question in the light of Quran and in the light of the sayings of Prophet, peace be upon him, and Islamic jurists. So I will start with Quran. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحيا فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. This is the fundamental principle in Quran about the sanctity of life. And a rough translation of it is, if anyone kills another human being, it is like he has killed the whole mankind. And if you save one life, it is like you have saved the whole humanity. This is the fundamental principle in the Quran. The saving life is ultimate. Then in Quran, there is explicit command. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. No ambiguity in it. Do not kill yourself, do not harm yourself. So these two verses I've recited from Quran, which are the fundamentals, provide the principle that all Muslims and all followers of Abrahamic religion, all followers of Hinduism, all followers of Buddhism, no religion will give you any teachings that the life is not sacred. And Muslims, among Muslims, it's ultimate. You have to save life. If you save one life, you save humanity. If you do something which lead to loss of life, like you have killed the whole humanity. This is the Quran. Now, the saying of Prophet, peace be upon him, they are called hadith, and I just recite one hadith to you. Al-Muslimu man salimun nasu min lisanihi wa yadih. Who is Muslim? Prophet, peace be upon him, is defining. The Muslim is the one whose tongue and hands, the people are safe. So Muslims do not harm other people, slandering them or harming them. So from Quran and Hadith, we learn this thing, that we should not harm ourselves and we should not harm others. And how does it fit with COVID? Everybody knows COVID harms people, makes people sick. Millions of people have died. If a Muslim does not follow infection control measures, washing hands at the appropriate time, wearing masks, having social distance in crowded places, source isolating when he's infected, and vaccinate. What is he doing? He is harming himself and he is harming another. He's going against Quran, which says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not harm yourself. And Prophet, peace be upon him, has defined a Muslim is one, the other people are safe from him. So this is after these, there should really be no need for further conversation. But unfortunately, a lot of people do hair splitting and use religion on technical grounds and to use it as an excuse that this thing is haram, this thing is halal. Okay, I have said the fundamentals. Saving life, life is sacred. All religions, Islam, Abrahamic religion, put specific emphasis. I now talk a little bit about technicalities of this. People say halal, haram. Who decides what is halal and haram? This is not your Imam Mosque who is going to decide. This is going to be Quran. This is going to be Prophet, peace be upon him. And this is going to be Islamic jurists, right? Now, what does Quran say about halal or haram? It has defined halal or haram very, very clearly. And I recite a verse from Quran. حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أحل لغير الله به. According to Quran, only 4 things are haram. And they are a dead animal, blood, this is for eating, swine flesh, and an animal which is not slaughtered in the name of Allah. And we also know in Islam, all intoxicants are haram. Alcohol, whether it's a full bottle or whether you take a drop, if it is for intoxication, not for medication. So there is no ambiguity. Quran has clearly identified 4 things which are haram. Okay, within the same verse, this verse finishes at this. فَمَنِ اسْتُرَّ فِي مَخْمَصَةٍ غَيْرَ مُتَجَانِفِ الْإِثْمِ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah has told you 4 things are haram, but if you are in istirar is when there's a danger to your life. Allah says, I have told you these things are haram, but if you are in istirar, if there's a danger to you, you can use these things. You can eat even swine flesh to save life. You can use swine products to save life. And anything just to save. This is Quran. It's your intention. Why are you using swine flesh or this or that, which is told to you haram, saving life? Your intention is not to disobey Allah. This is for Muslims. You are not using, oh, let's see how the bacon tastes. You are using this to save life. And this verse concludes, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. So even things which has been categorically told are haram, Allah says when it comes to saving life, they are halal.
Hamid, thank you so much.
The last slide,
yes.
The slide, let's show the slide because this is very important and people object that maybe there is something in the vaccine which is haram. And I really want to bust that myth. There is absolutely nothing in the vaccine. Now, the vaccine has got 2 parts. There are active ingredients and inactive ingredients. Nothing in it is derived from animals or swine, which could be considered haram. If you look at inactive ingredients, if you look Moderna and Pfizer, Moderna has 9 inactive ingredients. And what are they? They are water, salt, sugar, cholesterol. Nothing in it is haram. Pfizer has 11 ingredients. Again, same water, sodium, salt, this sort of thing. Nothing in it is haram. There are 2 vaccines, AstraZeneca and Janssen. They both have 9 ingredients. Purely benign. Only 1 ingredient, when one can do hair splitting, has ethanol. Ethanol is a form of alcohol. And as I said, intoxicant are haram. But when it's used for medicinal purposes, if you look the background, saving life is ultimate. And this ethanol, which is in these vaccines, the British Islamic Medical Association and Muslim Council of Britain has given their verdict. Its amount is so small that there is more alcohol in a piece of bread or in a banana. There's alcohol in cough syrup. Muslims pray and they spray all sorts of perfume. There's alcohol in it. Spirit, you clean hand on it. So you cannot use this excuse that there is 2 milligrams of ethanol in it. Of all the ingredients I have put in front of you, none of them is haram. You are not using it for intoxication. It's injected in you. It's a preservative. So from Islamic point of view, from Quran, from Hadith, from Islamic jurists, from Torah, from Gospel, from Quran, from Gita, there is absolutely nothing. You cannot use religion to stop people from vaccination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamid. So that message is very clear, and thank you so much for taking time to explain this. Can we move on to Giles? Giles, as we're aware, the issues of vaccine hesitancy can be quite complex, ranging from issues to do with confidence with the vaccine to risk perception, but convenience is also a major aspect. I wanted you just briefly for a minute or two to talk about the issue of Deakin Center and the logistics. We know the Trust has put in a lot of effort to allow staff to have easy access to these vaccines, but are things going to change?
Yeah, thanks, Sunny, and thanks to everybody on the panel for really informative session this morning. Yeah, so just very briefly then, little bit of background, and then I'll tell you where we're at here and now. So I think it's 13 months tomorrow since we started vaccinating on the campus. In that time, in the Deakin Centre, what should be an education centre, we've delivered somewhere in the region of 60,000 doses now, and with our friends and colleagues at Papworth, as a campus, thousands of more doses on top of that. So in terms of Deakin, Sunny, as you know, we have to juggle thawing and storing and using doses within their expiry period versus how many people are coming through the door to use them and we've got to a critical point now where the numbers coming through the door are so small that it's not viable to keep that centre running full hours every day of the week like we have been for the last sort of year or so. So today is the last day as it stands in the Deakin Centre. So if people haven't been vaccinated, have been informed and feel that they want to be vaccinated today as a result of this webinar, please just turn up at the Deakin Centre before, I'm going to say before 5 o'clock today. It closes at 6, but get there before 5, and we will do our very best to vaccinate you today. We are going to run 2 more sessions, that being said though. So on the 14th, so next Friday, and on the 21st, the following Friday, there will be 2 more days in the Deakin Centre, but that will be then it as far as our plans are at the moment. And the reason for staggering those 2 sessions again is to hopefully build up enough people to be able to warrant using more doses that we have thawed. How? So just turn up, walk in. If you're a CUH member of staff, bring your badge, and we will absolutely do our best to vaccinate you. Alternatively, if you want to secure yourself an appointment, you can go onto the national booking system, and we'll put the links and everything into the chat and the comms following this, and you can book yourself an appointment on today or either of those Fridays. So that's on site. But as a system, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough work very closely with all of the other vaccination centres across the patch. There is plenty of capacity in the system at the Grafton Centre, at GP practices, at various other sites across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough currently, and I've checked the numbers yesterday. There is absolutely space there. Again, accessed through the national booking system. Just go in and choose whichever location is going to be best for you and most convenient day and time for you, and there will absolutely be a vaccine available.
Thank you, Giles. And the issue of pregnant women and shielding beyond 28 weeks,
Yeah.
do you have anything to add here? I believe Shu was had some concerns there as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think, again, from feedback, I think one or 2 staff in that position, so pregnant staff at 28 weeks, reluctant to have the vaccine because they feel that may force them back into the workplace. Whereas, you know, at the moment, our risk assessment and national guidance is advising colleagues in that position to be working at home or certainly not in the workplace, vast majority. The vaccination status doesn't change that as things stand. So please don't not take the vaccine because you're worried about that as a result of it. Absolutely take the vaccination. The risk assessment's unaffected by that and that particular aspect of the risk assessment at present.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Giles. So we do have 3 questions that have been submitted. I would urge our listeners and viewers to please submit questions to the Q&A section of the webinar, and we'll try and address them. We do have only about 10 minutes to do so. Chris, I would like you to address 2 of the questions that have come up. The first one has to do with the risks of associated with giving the vaccine to children between the ages of 5 to 11 years old. A while ago, Chris Whitty did say that the risk of a child getting the virus was quite low versus the risk of side effects from the vaccine. Why has this changed? Why is the government now offering vaccination to this age group?
couple of things to consider here. It's certainly true that the older you are, the greater the risk coronavirus infection poses to you, with the exception that if you are pregnant, you're at high risk. So children are at very low risk, but that doesn't mean they're at no risk. And there are children who have underlying health disorders that mean they're at very high risk. And the current guidance isn't that we're routinely vaccinating young kids. The current guidance is that we can now, if we need to, offer the vaccine to children aged 5 to 11 to protect those who are extremely clinically vulnerable. Now, in some countries, they are using the vaccine in younger age groups, just routinely, because it's judged to be safe, it's shown to be effective. In the UK, our Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the MHRA, have authorised the use of the vaccine in 5 to 11-year-olds who are extremely clinically vulnerable, but at the moment it is not our policy. And this is what's decided by our JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. It is not the policy that we will routinely use the vaccines in that age group, because there is not really a justification at the moment for doing that in terms of saving lives, protecting health, but we can do that where those individuals are at extremely high risk, and that's where it's being used.
So in other words, really what we're trying to do is to protect those that are most vulnerable, children that are most vulnerable to severe COVID infection from catching COVID. It's all about a risk-benefit balance, isn't it? Thank you, Chris. So the other question had to do with the effectiveness of the booster jab. We know that a lot of us have now had the third dose as a booster. And we have heard reports that the effectiveness of the vaccine starts weighing after the 10th week. So are we going to start having boosters every 3 months? Chris, are we going down the route of repeated boosters for a period that cannot be defined, really? What's going to happen?
It's important to consider two different things that are going on here. There is the consideration of infection and the consideration of severe disease. Now, back in 2020, Boris Johnson's instruction to Kate Bingham, who was the vaccine task force lead, was we have to stop people dying. That was the priority. And so the main aim, the main intention of giving vaccines was to cut down the risk of severe disease. And the vaccines deliver on that in spades. They are absolutely brilliant. And the evidence we have is that once you've had a booster, you're 90% reduced risk, at 90% reduced risk of severe disease from any of these variants. And that doesn't seem to wear off in the same way that immunity just tails off with time. And this is probably a reflection on the fact that when you receive these vaccines, you don't just make antibodies, which are molecules that wash around in the bloodstream and mop up stuff that shouldn't be there. You also assemble a battery of T cells, which can recognize virally infected cells and fight them off. And so probably the presence of those T cells gives you long-term memory defense. So if you encounter the infection again, you don't become severely unwell in the same way as you would when you met it for the first time. But what's confused people is that in some cases, when we give vaccines, we accept, we assume, and we expect in many cases that we will be protected from infection completely. This is not the case. It's not the case for many viruses, and these coronaviruses are no exception. So while when you're first vaccinated, you do have very high levels of protection, and you almost certainly will be protected at least 80 or 90% of the time from catching the infection, that does wear off. And after 10, 12, maybe 6 months, 10, 12 weeks, 6 months, you will become susceptible to infection again. And that increases the chance of that happening with age, but you will probably not succumb to severe disease. So we're at a point now where the government are watching to find out, will we need to give more doses, more boosters, more vaccines, or is the underlying protection that we've conferred with what's probably going to be a 3-course sequence of vaccines, isn't it, with these vaccines? Is that enough to give everyone satisfactory protection now where this is actually the end of the road. And this winter is going to be very telling. And some people are speculating that the reason that we can have 250,000 known cases of coronavirus infection per day, but a very low hospital admission rate, relatively speaking, and a very low complication and severe disease rate, relatively speaking, is because we now have good foundational immunity in the vast majority of the population. Yes, the boosters helped. Will we hang on to that? We're hoping so. And probably we're going to find out in the next few months whether or not we have to return to a cycle of boosting some people, or whether this is going to be enough.
Thank you, Chris. So a common question we get is really the issue of natural versus vaccine induced immunity. What's the difference? Why is it that we're placing so much emphasis on vaccines rather than natural immunity protecting us?
Well, the problem is that this is a new infection for the majority of people. And we recognize that it is becoming endemic. It's not going away. It's going to continue to circulate. That being the case, everybody, and I mean everybody, at some point is going to catch this infection. They're going to encounter it. And so the question becomes one not of, do I encounter it? Possibly. It's when I encounter it, and what situation do I want to be in when I meet it? And you have a choice. You can be in a situation where your immune system is well prepared, so it's a trivial infection for you, or you encounter it unprepared, and it might be a severe infection for you. It might not, but it might. But as Boris Johnson said last year, your cough might be someone else's death knell. The point is that it might be a trivial infection for you, but it might well be a very severe infection for another person. So the best way to mitigate this is to have a vaccine, because A, if you're protected from infection in the short term, if you can't catch it, you can't give it to anybody. If you're vaccinated, you're almost certainly protected from severe disease. And then if you do catch it on top of that, you are probably reinforcing quite well the underlying immunity you've already made to the vaccine. So you will almost certainly be protected better for longer. The bottom line is, when you catch the infection, if you catch it mildly, you don't make a very good immune response. You certainly don't make a long duration immune response. So you almost certainly are setting yourself up to catch it again, and therefore give it to somebody else again. And there are various reasons why viruses that you catch naturally tend to produce, if you get mild infection, less good immunity than a vaccine, because the vaccines are optimized to drive a very good immune response very quickly, very efficiently, and to make it as long lasting as possible. And watch this space, because the manufacturers of these vaccines are coming up with the next generation of the vaccines, including what we hope will be a pan-coronavirus vaccine, vaccines that will treat you and protect you from variants that we don't even know exist yet, or don't exist yet, by targeting bits of the virus that never change.
Thank you, Chris. So in other words, vaccine-induced immunity is more robust, and it's more likely to protect us, protect our loved ones and those that we care for, than getting natural infection. Thank you, Chris. That's very clear. I know we are running out of time. We do have one last question, which I was wondering, Giles, if just over a minute, if you can try and address it. We have a staff member who said that he or she is patient-facing and compliant with everything, including mask wearing, vaccination, COVID tests, etc., but shares an office with a staff member who isn't really following the rules, particularly as it relates to wearing face masks and maintaining physical distances, etc. What would you say about this?
Well, it's concerning, deeply concerning, particularly in a healthcare setting. So first of all, mask wearing in healthcare settings is a mandation. That's just what we are told we have to do, and we must. And for the reasons that Chris has said, someone's cough might be a death sentence for someone else. So that's very clear. In shared spaces, everyone wears their mask, and that's what we do. In terms of testing, we have a very strong expectation that everybody that works at CUH takes up the testing as set out and as available, and we've got a really robust in-house program for that, which includes PCR testing. So I'd urge the person to do that. Can't force them, but very strong expectation, and I think there is a moral commitment from all of us to do what we can to look after each other. Ultimately, Sunny, there's health and safety law in play here as well. We're employed, we're part of an organisation, a workplace that is covered by health and safety law, and we all must do what we're asked to do to maintain the health and safety of ourselves, our colleagues, and of course those that use our services. So I'd call on the person to please do the right thing. If they've got fears or concerns or anxieties around that and why they're not doing that, talk to occupational health in complete confidence, and we'll try and help. And the colleague that's noticing this behaviours, please do feel free to share that with your manager and those responsible for your area as well, because they also have a commitment to do the right thing in their work area.
Thank you, Giles. So that's very clear. We've run out of time, I'm afraid. But thank you very much, members of the panel. Thank you, Tony, for arranging this. I think it's been a very useful 45 minutes. There will be further opportunities. Hopefully, we will have a webinar specifically dedicated towards allergy issues. We will also continue with the one-to-one sessions. There should be additional information on Connect. We've heard that these vaccines are safe. They do protect, regardless of whether you are pregnant or not, or whether you have underlying immunological conditions, etc. But there are support services available. Please do reach out to us if you have any concerns. For staff members that are yet to be vaccinated, time is running out. The earliest opportunity you have to be vaccinated is the first week of February. Otherwise, you will not be able to have the second dose by the first week of April. So it's really important that staff that continue to have concerns with the COVID vaccine approach us so that we can see how we can help. But thank you very much, and we'll be in touch at some point. Tony, I believe that this webinar will be available on Facebook. Is that right?
That's right. We will put a recording on the portal as well and make sure we include a link in the bulletin.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Danny.